This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, it's the Friday News Roundup, and we've got a blockbuster state budget to talk about, a housing milestone in Madison, and a possible nuclear site to come to our city. Plus, for our Neighbors Only segment, another construction worker injured in a dramatic way. What's going on? We're going to get into it. The team is here. Executive producer Haley Sperling. Hey, Haley.
Hey, Bianca. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And producer Jada Siri Ramos. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Yes. So, Haley, you're kicking us off this week with the state budget clamorings. What happened? What's going on?
Yes, there was a quote unquote blockbuster budget surplus deal that died this week in the Senate. RIP. Have you guys heard about this deal? Obviously, it's been kind of making waves throughout the political spheres of our state this week.
Yes, definitely hearing about it, and a lot of talk, and I don't know, blockbusters are back. I don't know what happened.
Rob did a really good write-up in Wednesday's newsletter, which is where I got a lot of my not social media reactions to this bill.
Facts.
+10, sign up for the CityCast Madison newsletter. This was a blockbuster deal, and it has nothing to do with our return to physical media. So if you haven't been following this story, it's a pretty big one coming out of our state house, and I will give you the details. Outgoing Democratic Governor Tony Evers reached a deal with outgoing Republican legislative leaders Robin Vos and Devin LeMahieu to spend down the state's multi-billion-dollar budget surplus. And to be clear, like I mentioned at the top, this package is dead in the water right now. It died in Senate Wednesday night. But here's a little bit of what it would have included, because folks were pretty excited about it. So it would have given roughly $870 million in one-time rebates to Wisconsin taxpayers, which breaks down to $300 checks for individuals and $600 for married couples. It would have given roughly $600 million to K-12 education, which included adding $300 million to the state's special education fund, which we know is desperately needed. It also would have led to the elimination of income tax on cash tips and overtime income, something that our president has been touting left and right these days. And it would have given $50 million in property tax relief to the Wisconsin Technical College system. So that's just kind of scratching the surface. It's a lot of stuff. Of course, the biggest piece of this roughly $1.8 billion deal was the school funding, which Madison education leaders were really excited about. The Madison Metropolitan School District Superintendent Joe Gothard called this proposal a, quote, critical lifeline for Wisconsin public schools, saying in a statement that, quote, the funding proposal is what our students, families, and communities deserve. But here's the thing. Not all were excited about this proposal, both on the Democratic and Republican side. Notably, two of Wisconsin's Democratic candidates for governor voted against the deal, and that is State Senator Kelda Roys and Representative Francesca Hong. And on the Republican side, gubernatorial candidate Tom Tiffany also voiced some pretty heavy displeasure with this package. And the overwhelming sentiment, at least on the Democratic side of things, is that, one, the education funding is more of like a Band-Aid solution, and there needs to be more real structural change to fund our school systems, which, fair point. Yeah, but money is money for these schools and they do need it. Also, they did not like the quote unquote backroom dealing of it all. It kind of felt like, at least to me as a very outside onlooker, that Evers, Vos, and LeMahieu came out of the woodwork and was like, here's a spending deal. Here's something exciting. Here's $300 in your pocket. And everyone's like, what? That's how I took it. And lastly, Democrats really didn't like that this deal would have potentially put them on shaky grounds for budget negotiations in the coming years, especially when they are poised or have at least the potential to take control of both legislative houses after this election. They said, basically, we had nothing to do with this deal, and we don't want to be dealing with the fallout when it comes through. Kelda Roys was particularly vocal about her displeasure with it all. And Tony Evers kind of threw some shade back at her, saying that, quote, she's angry because we didn't involve everyone prior to, and that doesn't happen with the regular budget, too. He said, quote, if she's going to be governor, she better get used to it. And I was like, oh, that's a little spicy. And also, on the Republican side, they really wanted more money for taxpayers, right? They're saying we are the ones hurting. We, as in taxpayers, are the ones hurting right now. And they want more than $300 and $600, respectively, for single and married couples. So now what? The $2 billion plus surplus will just sit until at least next spring. So this saga, as quickly as it was announced, goes away. What do you guys make of it all?
Evers saying that if he said it or somebody else wrote it for him that's kind of shady. That's shady as heck. And I feel that way, obviously, living in Madison. And if your representative feels like they didn't have a voice in this budget, that kind of ticks me off, frankly, so I'll just say that. And yeah, I definitely saw some of the arguments that Kelda was making. It was someone who went to social media, and I felt compelled by the point of which is like, this is going to be making changes to our tax code for like an immediate relief. So yeah, like hand me an ice cream cone. I'll be happy today. I'll take $300. But what are the ongoing, now I want more ice cream and the ice cream's run out, but you've given these, she didn't say the ice cream thing, that's me. But like you've given out these, favors to people, and you have to consider the fact that we are approaching an election. So is this like a bribe? Because I personally also am very interested in long-term structural change. So getting something done to get something done, it needs to be compelling, I think, to everyone, including the people who represent us here in Madison. Like, why talk down to them? Like, you're not always going to have a voice. Well, I want my person to have a voice.
Yeah. And again, both she and Fran Hong, who represents parts of the Madison area, voted against this. And Kelda literally did call this a bribe to voters in this election year. So yeah, you're right on the money with that one.
I think the thing that is striking for me is that these are all outgoing leaders. And so, they're thinking about their legacy and what they're going to be remembered as having done for the state. And I like to believe that, hopefully lawmakers have the best of the state in the future in mind too, but it is curious.
I do have one last question for you guys. If this did go through, what would you have done with your extra $300, or in Jade, your case, $600, being the only wedded member right now?
Well, I mean, I'm the only wedded member, but it's not like that $600 is mine. Like Alex and I would both essentially have, $300. I'm buying a new coffee table. I really am over the one that I've had for like the last 10 years that I got from an ex. I want a nice coffee table from, Rubens. I'm going to go to the showroom. I'm not even going to buy like a floor version. I'm going to buy a nice coffee table.
Saving people from haunted coffee tables. That's very important. I'll just be honest. Like, I would use it for expenses, for groceries. Like, it is like that right now. We're in tough economic times. And on that topic, we are going to be turning to another news story on Madison housing, which is another little snapshot of our tough economic picture. But before we get to that, we're going to take a quick break. All right, it's time for our weekly segment, Banking Outside the Box with Oak Bank, with the sponsor of this episode, Oak Bank. It's your opportunity to get your banking and financial questions answered by an expert.
This is Stephanie East, Treasury Management Officer at Oak Bank, and this week's question is, what sort of tools should customers look for in a banking partner to ensure they are protected? That's a great question, because fraud prevention really starts before any transaction ever hits the account. The first layer of protection is how well we know our clients and their businesses. We take time to understand their normal payment routine, so when something doesn't look right, it stands out quickly. From there, we add technology to strengthen that protection. One of our core tools is Positive Pay, which many clients already use for check fraud. With Check Positive Pay, clients enter a list of issued checks in online banking, and when a check is presented, we match it, flagging anything that doesn't align for review. We take that a step further with ACH Positive Pay, which works similarly but for electronic transactions. When an unfamiliar ACH transaction comes in, the client is alerted and can approve or reject it. They can also create approved vendor lists and set payment limits so routine transactions flow smoothly while anything unusual is flagged. Recently, a client received an alert for an ACH debit that didn't match their usual vendors or payment pattern. Because they recognized it wasn't part of their normal activity, they rejected it immediately, stopping a fraudulent transaction before any money left the account. Together, strong relationships and tools like Positive Pay give our clients better control, greater efficiency, and real peace of mind. To learn more, reach out to us at Oak Bank.
Huge thanks to Oak Bank for sponsoring this segment. If you've got a banking or financial question, hit the link in the show notes. You might even hear it answered in an upcoming episode. Okay, we're back, and some big news this week. I read it in a story from WPR, Wisconsin Today, and it just might burst your bubble on the state of housing. They linked to a Madison office of the city assessor that assessed for local real estate valuations, and our real estate here in Madison increased 6.1%. in 2026. Where does that leave us? That the average single-family home is being assessed at over $500,000. Madison, what year are we in, you guys?
I wish I was surprised by any of this. As someone who daydreams about owning a home in the neighborhood that I currently live in, like it costs you at least $500,000 if you want a second bathroom, which I do because I put the cats in the second bathroom. But, it's just, I've been looking at these prices for so long and I wish I could say I was surprised. But it's sad because for me, home ownership, it just feels further and further out of reach every year. And I am someone who lives in an abundance of privilege, but this is not a path for me to live in the area that I want to live in, which is a big bummer. And even the areas like outside of where I want to live in, it's so expensive out there. It's so expensive.
I think where this strikes me is when I'm like on Zillow and I look at like the history and I'm like, oh, this person bought this house for like, $150,000 like 10 years ago, and they're looking to sell it for $500,000. It's rough out there when you look at it in that specific way.
Yeah, like what Madison was not that long ago. That's why I was like, what year is it? Of course, but the same thing, like y'all, I think all of us stay looking at Zillow and looking at houses. I think that's just like a common practice maybe for Madisonians.
I think just millennials in general love Zillow.
Yeah. And also to your point, like Haley, daydreaming, you're not alone. I'm feeling that way. And the average age of a first-time American homebuyer is now 40 years old. So I guess we haven't missed the boat. Jade got in a boat. But like, it's sincere. So back to the story. Yes, property values in Madison hit a new milestone last week. $500,000 for average single family homes. I think that bears repeating. WPR talked with the city and they shared that they assess values yearly, which, by the way, the state only requires you to do that every 5 years by law. But because there's so much growth in Madison on a regular basis, they have to watch out for impacts on rising property taxes and any potential housing bubbles. And the long and short of it is, why is this happening? The housing stock is low and construction is slowed. So in their story, they talked to a real estate attorney who told them construction of new homes has fallen to about half of what it was pre-2008 financial crisis. And construction is feeling the pressures. Gonna touch on that a bit in our Neighbors Only segment. But this picture is really tough. And as we said, specifically for first-time home buyers. Because a lot of this low supply is also impacting older generations. People who would normally consider downsizing their house, moving out, going to somewhere smaller, that space is just so full. People looking for smaller homes, it's a small stock. So as Haley said, also, like, this isn't just a Madison problem. Like, Madisonians are starting to look outside of the city for housing and are frankly like flooding neighboring areas. And they're driving prices up across the board. So, looking at you, McFarland, DeForest, Oregon, These areas are now being forced to reckon with Madison competitors. I feel for them because, hey, wages are not rising. I want a house. I've been looking too. This is crazy, y'all.
Well, Bianca, you hit on something that I think is what I'm facing, which is I'm in this house that I very much see as my first home, right? I would love in 5 years to move to a different house, maybe my dream house, maybe my forever home, whatever those sayings are. But the way that I feel so tied down here, partially because of my interest rate, which I got during the pandemic, and because the cost of my mortgage now and the cost of my mortgage in a dream home are going to be so vastly different, it's really hard to make that leap. And so you have people who did get in and were first-time home buyers feeling like they can never leave that first-time home and not opening that space up to someone else.
This is something too, I'm glad that we're bringing this story up because obviously we cover housing a lot on this show, in the newsletter, all the time. It is always top of mind for Madisonians, but usually from the perspective of rentals. And we're talking about when's that next, 10-story apartment going to be built? What's going on Willie Street? Is Park Street the next East Wash, And we've just kind of started scratching the surface of the whole home ownership aspect of it all. The conversation that you had, Bianca, with Justice Casinera about home ownership and where and who gets to have access to these starter homes or just homes in general is really a key point and something that really, honestly, I think we need to be talking about more, though it's a double-edged sword. It's just hard. The city and the whole area, we're just stuck between a rock and a hard place because it's expensive to build. There's not a lot of space and demand is high. So what are you going to do?
Maybe we did need that $300.
Right.
Okay, we are in a dark place. But what might bring some light is discussions around a possible new energy site, nuclear energy site, in a place that has been long discussed for housing, Oscar Mayer. We're going to talk about that story in a moment, but first, let's take a quick break. Okay, we're back. And Jade, what is possibly happening or brewing around the Oscar Mayer site?
Yeah, so Madison, like you alluded to, might be getting a new nuclear fusion research site. The company, Realta Fusion, is looking to expand, and Wisconsin is one of 2 states that it is looking at right now. And in Madison, if they were to come here, the location would be in the former Oscar Mayer factory, which is on Madison's northeast side. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But basically, Realta is currently a Madison-based business. They employ about 40 people and are currently sponsoring research at the UW-Madison Physics Department. They are looking to build their own prototype machine and continue their research and development on nuclear fusion. Now, I want to pause here for a second because there are some foundational questions and things I need to iron out before we go too much deeper into Realta's plans. So first and foremost, what's the difference between fission and fusion? I think a lot of people have differing levels of knowledge on this type of science. So I'm curious between the two of you, how do you feel about your base knowledge of nuclear fusion and fission?
Everything I've learned about nuclear power has come from either George W. Bush or The Simpsons. So little to none.
I did Science Olympiad in high school, and so I like science a big ton, and one of the draws to UW-Madison really was their physics department. So I know a little bit about it, and a lot I learned from a man who pulled me aside at a party at New Orleans, who's a nuclear physicist, and talked to me for literally an hour about it. So I feel like I know a little bit, and I'm sure there's so much I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get to this so much that you don't know, really. I'm going to keep it pretty surface level because before I got into this today research, I was like, this is physics, right? I was like, this isn't chemistry. I was really, that's the sort of level that I'm at. But I want to talk about the difference between fission and fusion, which both release a large amount of energy that can be captured, stored, and used. Nuclear energy is not a renewable energy source, but it is considered clean energy because it doesn't directly impact climate change the way that fossil fuels do. And so the difference between fission and fusion is that fission splits atoms. This is usually uranium. And fusion forces atoms together. This is usually hydrogen. Right now, commercial nuclear plants use fission, which is that splitting. And fusion is harder than fission, which is why fission is so much more common. Fission reactors are producing about 9% of the world's electricity right now. So it's pretty common. And the big concern with nuclear energy is radioactive waste. I mean, we've all heard of Chernobyl. So fission and fusion are different here too. Nuclear fission produces radioactive waste that can be dangerous for thousands of years and requires long-term, very secure storage, while nuclear fusion doesn't have the same problem. The byproduct of fusion with hydrogen is helium, which we're all very familiar with. And there is still radioactive waste that comes from fusion, but this is primarily from the machine itself. So, if there's So where the fusion is happening, the walls of the machine become radioactive and need to be disposed of properly when that time comes. And that's according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. All right. Did I lose you? Are we feeling good? I know, Bianca, you had spoke to Andrew Ball last year about this. Is there anything for you that you want to pinpoint or chime in on?
Yeah, I just frankly am excited about UW-Madison's capacity to be in partnership with Rialta and looking into fusion and its possibilities. It feels like nuclear energy is a very complex topic and very scary for a lot of good reasons and like long-lasting ones, and the damage is severe and if things go wrong. And also the positives of it going right are very great, right? So it's one of these things that it feels very prudent to be putting resources towards developing this. And at the same time, we want our best minds on it. And I like Madison's minds. I'm betting on us. So you guys go off with your bad selves.
I do think it's interesting, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation now. I was at a Founder Day event earlier this week, and so many of those founders are talking about AI and those AI startups that they're, diving into and looking for investments on. And obviously, we've had a lot of conversations about AI and the use of data centers. And now there's this interesting conversation coming up about, could nuclear energy power these data centers, which is a really interesting concept, right? But obviously, there's still a lot of considerations with the whole nuclear waste situation and the fact that it still takes an extreme amount of water to keep them cool. I am really interested in this. And it is, like Bianca said, really kind of special and unique that Madison could be a place for this. I'm not going to lie, it makes me a little nervous because the Oscar Mayer plant, there's residences, there's businesses all around here. And obviously this is not like a nuclear power plant, right? I don't want to say that, but just anywhere where there is this kind of really cool and innovative research happening with really dangerous materials makes me nervy.
Yeah, and I think that's also part of why it's important to break down what is fusion and what is fission. Largely, fusion is considered to be much safer than fission. It's just way harder to do. There are currently no fusion energy power plants. It's all fission energy power plants. What's happening with Rialta is they are, sort of on the forefront of how do we make this into a commercial energy source, and they are very much in the research and development stage. They're looking to expand out of what they're currently doing with the UW and create their own prototype and do that possibly in the Oscar Mayer building. Now, like I said, Madison is currently just an option at this point, but there are several reasons that Rialta is looking to expand here, according to their CEO, Kieran Furlong. For one, they're based in Madison, right? There's 40 employees who are here. It would be nice for them to stay here. And also UW-Madison is based out of here. And every year it's graduating students with the necessary skills to take these jobs, which they are planning to have about 400 jobs created at the site. And Wisconsin is also very friendly to nuclear energy. There were several bipartisan bills that were passed last year to encourage nuclear fusion in Wisconsin, including a tax exemption for qualifying projects. Like we've been talking about, they're looking at the Oscar Mayer site, which I will say is an underutilized part of Madison's northeast side. We talked about housing there, but I think that this would be a good use of the space and could really set us as, in the forefront of nuclear fusion energy. I don't know how you guys are all feeling about this story.
Feelings. Maybe, fusion's going to bring us all together versus tear us apart, like fission. Frankly, since, as I said, like before I even came here and went to school at UW-Madison, I knew they're doing this research. This is happening. It's been happening. And this would be just giving it, more space to further that work. I think the arguments that might be made against it is Madison's only so big, and Oscar Mayer, that site, that location has been discussed for a lot of different things, and when and where that payoff for fusion would come is under question. That said, I'm a huge supporter of scientific research, and I also was told by a friend of the show, Scott Resnick, he had listened to the conversation on AI data centers that I did with David Platts, the CEO of CityCast, just kind of like if it should come to Madison or not. But basically the Oscar Mayer plant, the city put a lot of money in around their water infrastructure. And I assume that's probably why this site is being considered for a nuclear research site. So, hey, I'm excited to keep hearing more about how this progresses or not.
I'm just thinking about how cool or maybe scary it would be for folks who are like coming from the airport, people who like maybe land in Madison and then get in an Uber and be like, to your left is our nuclear research facility. I don't know. Kind of cool, kind of scary.
Are you picturing like The Simpsons, like fish with three eyes hopping out of the
hopping out of Yahara? I mean, you're already not supposed to eat those fish.
We hope remediation continues on the Yahara watershed. We love you, Yahara. And speaking of people that we love our neighbors. We'll say no neighbor shout outs this week. If you are a neighbor listening, write us. Write in, folks, doing good work, people that you like, write in about yourself. Let us know things to get shouted out on this Friday News Roundup. I will say we did get into pretty lovely messages from listeners this week about our episode from Monday with Brandy Grayson. If you didn't hear that conversation, definitely recommend you go back and listen. But as I talk about why is Madison so obsessed with this leader, this strong Black woman, she makes headlines all of the time, and sometimes it seems unfairly so. And that was the basis of that conversation.
Thank you, yes, to people who comment on our Spotify, like Brishan, who said this, quote, "Thank you for unapologetically calling white Madison out/in during this conversation. White people need to hear this. It is unfortunate that a sect of white Madisonians will react defensively to this conversation rather than sitting back and listening and hearing your truths. Shout out to Bianca for calling out that the response to Brandy's refusal to code switch is racism. Thank you again for centering such a bold conversation on this podcast. Keep ruffling feathers." Thank you, Brishan.
That was a great comment. They wrote this on Spotify, and I really like when people comment on Spotify or wherever you listen. It's just really nice to know that you guys are like listening and hearing what we as a team take such care in putting out in the world. Bianca, you really had such a thoughtful and open and warm conversation with Brandy. I know, Haley, you did a lot of work behind the scenes making that what the show ended up being. And I really love when people comment on our shows like this.
Yeah, it means the world to be recognized, and we do this every day, so we're just move on to the next one. So when we get feedback, we take it seriously. And I had someone write me personally. They wrote me and said, "Hey, just wanted to say great job on today's episode. I'm sure that talking so openly about the reality of racism in Madison and inviting people like Brandy on the show to share their truth opens you up to a lot of nasty criticism from folks who'd rather you didn't." Again, this is me aside, because a lot of people want to be talking about this person. That's why we talked with her. And this is the rest of their comment. I just wanted to say thank you for taking that risk and all you do to share information and perspectives around the city to your audience. That's why we're here. We're here to have the real conversations and, really make sure that we're not veering away from challenging topics. Like, we want to be a better city together. And for those of you who recognize that, thank you. Thank you to everyone who listens. And also, we have new neighbors to thank, right, Haley?
Yes, we do. We have 2 new neighbors to thank. So shout out to these 2, Martha K. and Karen L. We are so thankful for your support. Being a neighbor is literally the best way to support our work here, other than listening and reading. If you're interested in becoming a neighbor, you can join us. It's not that hard, I promise. You can just head to membership.citycast.fm/Madison. You'll get all the perks of being a CityCast Madison neighbor, which includes our Neighbors Only segment, which Bianca is going to dig into shortly. You also get the perk of ad-free listening, our exclusive Neighbors Only events newsletter, and invites to our Neighbors Only events, which we are currently planning for the rest of this year. So it's really exciting. It's a great way to get involved with the city. If you're looking to hang out with like-minded people, talk about what's going on in Madison with people who aren't afraid to talk about the dirtier side of things, who aren't afraid to dig into the less exciting, Madison's a top 10 city because, we're a great place to live, but not without flaws and not without criticism. And I think that's such an important thing that we do here on the show is open the door to those transparent conversations.
Yes, we're looking for fusion, not fission at this moment, folks. Become a neighbor today at membership.citycast.fm/Madison. And y'all, the Neighbors Only segment this week is getting to another construction worker who was injured in a dramatic way near downtown, this time in a forklift accident. I'm concerned. Are we moving too fast to meet this housing crisis moment? We're going to talk about it. Neighbors will get to hear that now. All right, that's it for our Friday News Roundup. Thanks for rounding up the news with me this week. Haley Sperling.
See you later.
Jade Isiri Ramos.
Have a great weekend.
That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm your host, Bianca Martin. We're produced by Jade Isiri Ramos with help this week from Elizabeth Kama, PJ Shahamat, and Laura Satsui. Haley Sperling is our executive producer. Our theme music is by Carl Christensen. Rob Thomas is our newsletter editor. You can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to the CityCast Madison newsletter. And don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Madison. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast episode with someone who loves fusion? Come together now. All right, y'all. See you back here Monday morning with more news from around the city. Until then, thanks for listening and have a great weekend.